Hello and welcome back to the Summer Day Studios YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how to model something, and that thing in particular is this knife. So we've had a couple comments requesting how to model, in particular, a sci-fi knife or grenade or any kind of prop in general, and I thought a knife would be a good one to go with just because it's generally a simpler object, but we want to make it sci-fi and we want to make it look cool, not just like a simple medieval dagger type knife. So I found this reference online, which belongs to an artist I found on ArtStation, called Stefan. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's got really cool work on here, really cool like sci-fi hard surfacey stuff, and he made this really cool knife design. So we're going to go ahead and essentially recreate something like this in Maya. I thought this kind of twisted blade design is really cool, and a little bit more of a challenge than just creating a straight blade, but actually this design is quite easy to do. So let's get right into it. You can either make this one if you want to follow along, or do one slightly different. That's up to you. But we're going to be doing this with nice clean topology, and maybe eventually later on we'll get into doing materials for this as well, and UVs and stuff like that. So to begin with, I'm just going to put my reference to the side. If you have a second monitor, I would absolutely recommend doing that. If you don't have a second monitor, I absolutely recommend picking up a cheap as hell one, if you can, just to put your reference on the side, because it makes it so much easier to see what you're doing if you can see your reference constantly, or even just use your phone or anything else you've got, right? Just so you can refer back to it rather than have to minimize Maya. It definitely helps with the workflow. To begin with, we're going to start off by creating the blade, right? Because I'd say that's maybe one of the more complicated pieces. The handle is a little tricky because it's got various different bits and pieces going on here, but we'll start with the blade just because I feel like that's the main part of the dagger. So you can see it's twisted, but if you think the base shape is actually kind of triangular, we've got these 3 points here. Rather than just being a flat blade like normal, it's triangular. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and create a cube, and I am simply going to go into vertex selection mode. You can do that from the modeling toolkit. Select these two edges. I'm going to come up to edit mesh up here, and I'm going to click merge to center. Then we're going to select these two again, and you can just press G on your keyboard to repeat the previous action. And now we have a triangle, nice and simply, from a cube. Honestly, I don't know why this isn't one of the default models that you can make, because a triangle is sometimes useful. Albeit not used often, I find. And I'm just going to have that sit on the grid. I'm now going to just scale that up to length. Okay, it's quite a long-ish blade, so I'm going to go with maybe something like this. And then we'll come to face selection mode. And we're just going to extrude the tip out a little bit, okay? We could also just add a multi-cut too, that's okay, but I'm just going to do extrude for the sake of this. Something like this, maybe. Okay, now that we've got our point, I'm going to go back into vertex selection mode, select all of these at the top, and then I'm going to come back to edit mesh, and I'm going to merge these to center again, just to create the base of our blade, right? So we've now got this triangular shape. We've got our point, which I might actually make a little bit longer. Something like this. And that's going to form the base. So right now it's looking very blocky. So let's work into this to make this a bit more accurate to our reference. I think this isn't quite wide enough on the bottom, so I'm just going to go into face selection mode and scale this out a little bit. Just to make this a bit more even on each side. Maybe something like that. It's looking a bit more chunky. Okay, next I want to create this fuller that goes in the middle. I think that's what it's called, a fuller. This little indentation, normally it would be for like people say it's a blood groove, but I think historically these were for like just reducing weight of the blade without harming the structural integrity of it, because these things can get quite solid and heavy. So I'm going to use the multi-cut tool. I'm going to hold down shift and then just click just to snap those points to here. And we're just adding some new edges to form the base of this fuller that we're going to create. And you'll notice at the moment that we're keeping things nice and simple. I'm going to put another edge down here. I'm just holding down Control because I don't want this to run all the way to the bottom, just close to the bottom. We're keeping things nice and simple right now because it just keeps things easier to work with. Okay. We don't want things to get too dense too quickly because it's just going to make this harder to work with. If we had a bunch of polygons, it would take forever to select things. It's going to get heavier. It's just going to be, in general, more of a pain in the butt. So we keep things as simple as possible for as long as possible while we're modeling. I'm going to select those 3 edges, and I'm just going to come to bevel. And then we're going to increase the fraction. Actually, first of all, I'm going to add another edge here because I don't want this to come all the way up to the point. I just want it to come close enough to it. Then we'll come back to bevel. We'll increase the fraction a little bit. Maybe to something like this. Next, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup so we can add this rounded edge that we want on here. We don't want this to just be flat like this. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the multi-cut tool, and I'm just going to hold down left click and drag across like this. Come to the edge tool, double select that, then grab the scale tool and just scale down in the y-axis just to flatten that off. The reason we're adding this edge is because I kind of want it to be a supporting edge, because we're going to go ahead and delete some of these that we don't need. Okay, so all of these extra edges here, which aren't really doing anything, just going to select all of those, and we're going to delete them and keep this part here. Important thing is though, if you just press delete, it's going to leave some leftover vertices, as you can see here, which aren't connected to anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and select all of those and delete those. Okay, then maybe I'll pull this edge down a little bit more. Okay, at the base, I'm okay with having this squared off, so I'm going to leave that as it is. But then I'm going to go ahead and select the face tool, select all the faces that make up our fuller, and then we're just going to go ahead and click extrude. If you didn't notice how I'm doing that, by the way, I'm holding down shift, right click, then going to extrude faces, the marking menus. You can also just do that from the modeling toolkit. It's the exact same thing, just depends how you like to do things. And I'm going to extrude in a little. Make it as deep as you want, something like this. Okay, and to get those rounded edges, we're just going to simply use the bevel tool. So I'm going to select the edge selection mode, select all of these guys. Then we're going to click on bevel, and we're going to change that fraction all the way up to 1, just so it snaps. So we've got a triangle right now, but I'm going to increase the segments to 2. Again, keeping things nice and simple. We don't need to do anything crazy right now. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. One thing I always like to do whenever I've done this is just to press 3 on the keyboard to do a sanity check to see if we've got any vertices which are on top of each other, because that will very quickly show you. But in this case, it's not working too well because the topology up here right now is busted, but we'll fix that later. So I'm just going to quickly go to vertex selection mode and just move this. And you can see what's going on is we've got vertices on top of each other. That often happens when you're doing the bevel tool. And setting the fraction all the way to 1. Used to be that Maya would merge those for you, but sometimes that doesn't work. So just make sure to check for that. If that happens, just select all the vertices that are on top of each other. Come back to edit mesh again, and then go to merge the center like we did for the point of the blade. And then now you can see that's just one vertice. We're probably going to have to do this for this one as well. So just keep in mind whenever you're modeling that you will from time to time have to do this. It's just generally bad practice to have double vertices. They're not going to do anything for you, and it's just going to create weirdness later on. So now that's fixed, we don't have any extra vertices there. Okay, now it's time to start cleaning this up a little bit so this doesn't cause us any issues, because right now this is one big n-gon. An n-gon is just a polygon that has more than 4 vertices, right? You have tris, which is 3, as the name suggests. Quads, again, as the name suggests, is 4, and n-gons is anything that's 5 or over, and generally you want to avoid them. They're not the end of the world. A lot of people will be topology purists and say that you must not have n-gons or triangles at all, otherwise your firstborn's going to be kidnapped and killed or something horrendous like that. But generally, in all seriousness, they're okay. Generally, it's just a lot of beginners complain about stuff like that. Unless it's actively causing issues with your model, or you're doing character modeling, maybe don't have an n-gon on his face. It's probably not going to be an issue, let's be honest. We're just going to connect these up like this as well. Turning all of these into quads. Okay, and then what I might do is pull some of these vertices down a little bit. It's a good idea as well with this to keep things as even as possible. Okay, so there we go. We pretty much have the base shape modeled in. What I'm going to do next is come to the face selection mode. I'm just going to delete this bottom face because we don't need it for the time being. I'm also going to delete these edges at the bottom because we don't want this to really terminate into a triangle. I can hold down Control and Delete, and what that will do is it will remove that extra vertice that would have been there had we just pressed Delete like we had earlier. And if you look at the reference, you can see we have some little grooves like this, okay? These kind of circular indents. So let's go ahead and add those. So we could add 3. For today's video, I'm just going to add 1, but feel free to add as many as you like. You'll do it the exact same way. I'm just going to use the multicut tool to add in a new edge down towards the base, round about here. I'm going to add another one round about here. And this edge will kind of define how wide that groove is going to be. So I'm going to have it something like this. Okay, you can see that's going all the way around. Then I am going to go ahead and use the multicut tool again. And I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm just going to add one around about like this. Actually, we'll go ahead and put it in the middle. And then we'll do that on all the sides. Okay, so you can see that's kind of gone up and around. That's okay though. If anything, it's made these quads up here a bit more even. And we'll need that density later. But we have this cube here, which is going to be important because we're going to go to face select mode. And then we're just going to delete those. Like so. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and select 2 of these edges. Then we're going to click bridge just to combine those 2 together, and we'll do that 3 times for each one. Now we've got a few faces here that we need to fill in. We can literally just come up to mesh and then go to fill hole. That's then going to fill the hole at the bottom again. I'm just going to delete that for the time being, but you can see it's filled in those triangles. So those will now form the base of our grooves. But they're not looking very circular right now like they are in the model or in the reference. So let's go ahead and select these edges. And again, like we did with the fuller at the top, we're just going to bevel these like so. Okay, and then we're going to add 2 segments as well just to round that off. So now we've got those little round indents. This creates some issues with the topology, okay? As you can see here, it's creating extra edges, and you'll find this happens a lot when you model, and it'll depend on the way you model things. This is just generally how I like to do things. I'm going to go ahead and start deleting these edges because we just don't need them. They're going to cause us issues. One thing that might be good to do beforehand is to use the multicut tool just to connect these up like this, because sometimes if you delete too many edges around an inset like this, it could potentially break things. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete a bunch of these. And this is something that you kind of have to not be afraid of while you're modeling, because there's going to be times where you just need to, your mesh is going to look a little dirty, to be honest. It's just going to not be clean, but that is 100% okay, and it's fully part of the process, okay? You just got to embrace it, as long as you're not breaking anything. And that's why we stay low poly at this stage, because it just helps us to keep things nice and simple. All right. What I'm going to do now is finish up deleting the rest of these. Like so. We've got a few extra guys here. Okay, this is probably going to mess up those edges that we added earlier, but honestly, that's okay. We can just add those back in. I will just delete that one as well. Okay, last few to get rid of. Okay, so now we just have that nice and clean down there with those shapes, and nothing's broken because we've got that conjoining edge. So what I'll do next is I always like to add a bit of a protective edge whenever adding details like this. So I'm going to grab the multicut tool and just slice directly across. Then I'm going to use that little scale trick we did earlier just to make that flat. And I'm going to do the same just below it as well, just to protect this off and remove it kind of from everything else, if that makes sense. We're going to bring this edge back down. Again, I would like to bring that back to help line things up. Okay. And what I will do is probably go ahead and delete these little edges here as well, because while they are adding a bit more curve, I don't think we necessarily need them, and I think they're going to cause more problems really than they solve. So that creates a bit of a tapered shape here, but you could very quickly just fix that by selecting all those vertices and scaling out a bit if you want to. But then all that means is now we can just very quickly connect that up to here. Like so. And then we just literally need to add an extra edge in there and have that connect up, and that fixes that. And then we can just do the same thing on the bottom. Like so. another one come along the middle. Okay, and now we've fixed that, and that's all quads now. So I'll just go ahead and do the rest. Okay, and last thing to do is just to get all these edges to come down to the base. Okay, I have actually just encountered a little error here. So you'll notice that this edge here is kind of separated from everything. We're getting something weird going on. So if that happens, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that face. And then just press 3 on the keyboard again, because that's going to give you a smooth preview and you can sanity check things. You see we've got an extra face here that we can't actually see. I'm just going to delete that, because that's going to cause way more issues than we want. And it could create a bunch of problems for us later on down the line. And it's definitely one of the things I see beginners struggle with quite a lot, is that they get faces sitting on top of each other. So I'm just going to extrude those down. Okay, then I'm just going to come to Edit Mesh and click on Merge, and then that will weld all of those vertices together for us, which would have been at the corners. Okay, there we go. Now we have almost some very nice clean quad topology. One last part to connect up is this here. So this is currently a quad, right? Technically 1, 2, 3, 4. But because of the way we're going to do this, I like to connect these up and then become triangles. Trust me, this is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Okay, we're nearly at the point now where we can twist this. Just notice there's one more to clean up. We'll go ahead and just run a edge going all the way up the middle there. And we'll do that quickly on all 3 sides. So the way I like to do this, and people don't necessarily do this the exact same way, is I kind of just keep things simple. I make the edits quite dirty to begin with, as in not really adhering to good topology, and then I just clean it up afterwards. I find it a lot easier that way to make complicated shapes. And again, just don't hesitate, just do it. And then keep it simple, and you shouldn't have as much of an issue with practice. Okay. We could go ahead and fill in a bunch of quads here, but we don't actually need any. There's not going to be any detail here. But that being said, we are going to be twisting this. So in order to twist this, we're going to need more geometry here, right? We won't be doing it this way, but if I was to just twist this now, you can see it's kind of doing what we want, but it looks a bit goofy because there's not enough topology in the center here. So we're going to need to add some more edges in the middle. And to do that, I'm going to use a different tool than the multi-cut tool. I'm going to come up to the mesh tool, or mesh tools, and go to insert edge loop tool. And this works similarly to the multi-cut tool, but instead it just does edge loops, which is great. But it also has a really powerful feature where if I double click it here on the left, or you can come up to mesh tools and click on this little square next to it. If I change this to multi-edge loops under maintain position and set this to something like 10, and then click, it's going to go ahead and put in a bunch of extra loops. Okay, this will probably be enough. We could add in enough to make this like even quads, but honestly, we don't need to do that. That's kind of overkill. So I'm just going to go with something like 10, okay? Even then, that might be too many, but just for the sake of it, let's do 10 today. So now we have nice even quad topology, but it's looking a little low poly, and we need to add the twist to this. Well, in order to twist this, it's actually a lot easier than it might seem at face value. What we're going to do is, with our model selected, we're going to come up to deform, okay? We're going to go to nonlinear, and then we're going to click on twist, okay? And that's going to create this little handle thing that goes up the length of the blade. I'm just going to come to the channel box. And we've got a few different things we can do here. You see what low bound, high bound, you don't need to worry about these, but we've got start and end angle, okay? If I were to start increasing the end angle, you can see that's twisting our blade. You could really rank this up and create this kind of twisty monstrosity. We don't really have enough topology for that, but looking at our reference, you can see here we kind of just have one twist. It's not a massive one. It just twists around once. So if we reduce that down to maybe something like this. Okay, just to add a little bit of a twist. I might even make that a little bit less. Right, we just want a bit of a twist. And then we can also change the start angle if we want that to have more twist at the base. But I'm just going to go with the end angle. Something like that. That looks pretty cool to me. Okay, and you can see that's so much easier than having to actually model this in yourself. This would just be madness if you're trying to do this. You could do this, but it's so much easier just to use deformers that I don't know why you would do it any other way, to be honest. One other thing that I'd like to do is add a bit of a taper to the top so that this actually gets more slender as it comes up. So to do that, we can just come to deform, non-linear again, and then go to flare. And that handle looks very, very similar. And this is going to work much in the same way, but we've got start flare and end flare in the X and Z axes. Not Y, obviously. But we can just do it in the width. So if we go to the end flare and select both of these, then just hold down your middle mouse and drag in a little bit. You can see that comes down to more of a point. If this is jumping too much when you're doing this, there's this little chart thing up here, this slider. Just double click that until that's filled in just by a little bit of a quarter. Pie chart, I guess, kind of thing. That will just slow that down more so you can get a bit more control. I'm going to scale this in so it has a bit more of a point. Something like that. Okay, so that is the basis of our blade. As a last step, let's go ahead and just make the base of this, because you can see here we're going to have to connect this up to the handle, and this kind of converts into a cylinder, which might seem really daunting, but it's actually not too bad. So we've got a good amount of edges here at the bottom, which is really, really nice because it's going to give us enough topology to make a circular shape, a cylindrical shape. So what I'm going to do is just go into edge selection mode, select all of these edges at the bottom, and I'm just going to extrude. Okay, but I'm going to press R to come back to the scale tool because I just want to scale this out linearly. Right now, this is making a triangle, which obviously is not what we want. We want this to be a circle, but Maya has a handy dandy little tool called Circularize up here in the poly modeling shelf. If we go ahead and click that, it's going to convert this into a circle for us. It's not quite centered on the grid, so I'm just going to hold down X with this outside edge selected and then just snap that over. Now you can see at the bottom of our blade, we have a circle. I'm going to go ahead and scale that in, just so that kind of sits maybe something like that. Okay, and there you have it. That's the base. Then we can select this edge, come to extrude and come down like so. And then maybe we'll have that flare out a little bit like that, just for cool factor. Okay, and there you have it. So that's how you create the blade for this knife. In the next part, we'll go ahead and look at how you can create this cool looking handle. We'll look at how you can add your bevels to this, and how we can smooth this later as well if you want to make your high poly or to bake it down to a low poly. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have any questions at all or you get stuck with anything, feel free to let me know or ask any questions in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next part. Bye-bye.